I'm now going to delve into some spoilers. So if you have not read this book and don't want to be spoiled, please do not watch the rest of this video. I don't want to spoil it for you. Our main character's name is Mari, and she has an older sister, and her older sister has been asleep for 2 months. And yeah, she just announced one day to her family, like, hey, I'm gonna go to sleep for a while. And then she did. She went to sleep for a while. Though apparently she's probably being awake at some point because, like, they feed her and the food disappears, but no one has seen her actually be awake since all of this. So again, bizarre things are happening. But things get way more bizarre during this night. Eri Asai is still asleep. She's like fast asleep in her bed. In fact, it mentions how her sleep is almost not normal. It's like too deep. All of a sudden, her TV screen turns on and it's not even plugged in. A lot of what happens to Eri Asai is basically like straight out of a horror movie. It's terrifying. So yeah, this TV turns on, no plug, and it's this static, and the picture slowly comes in and kind of like gives a clearer image. And so eventually, what's on this TV is like, it's almost like this video footage of this like surveillance camera of this like mostly empty room. The only thing that's in this room is this man who's sitting on a chair, and there's no one else in the room. It's just this man on a chair, and he's just like sitting there, and he's just like staring. And the way that the TV is set up and the way that the man's face is like looking, it looks as if he's staring at Eri Asai, who is asleep in her bed, which that in and of itself is terrifying. It's almost like he can directly see through the TV to Eri, which is freaky. So when we do look at his face, we can't see it because he's wearing a mask. And this mask is like somewhat form-fitting to his face, but it's also made in such a way that you can't actually see his features underneath it. So we don't know what he looks like underneath this, which again, super creepy. Eventually, she is transported into this room with this man creepily staring her down. But again, he doesn't move or do anything other than just stare, and she is just fast asleep. He eventually like disappears, just randomly, and then Eri starts to slowly, ever so surely, wake up in this empty, weird room, and the only thing that's in there is her bed and a pencil. Yeah, so she's just like looking around, she's trying to figure things out, she tries to look out the window, but there's nothing outside. There's nothing to look at. There's nothing to see. And then she also tries to like turn the doorknob to get out, and like the doorknob keeps spinning. Like it's not even locked. It just like, it's like there is no door there. Like the doorknob keeps spinning. There's no way to get out. Terrifying. And she's panicking, and then at some point she gets this feeling that like everything that makes her Eri Asai is being like stripped from her. Like it mentions like her organs and like who she is as a person is like disappearing. Again, super creepy. But eventually everything kind of like rights itself, if you will, and she's transported back into her room and everything is fine. But because of how the story is told, like we start off actually with Eri's sister, Mari. Mari's basically the main character that we're following in the story. And she's the one that's like wandering about town because she doesn't like to be at home because her sister is just sleeping the whole time. It's just kind of weird for her to like attempt to sleep when her sister hasn't been awake for 2 months. Mari's story, like we're interspersed with Mari's story and then Eri's story. So I told you like all of Eri's stories right at once, but this is like slowly happening throughout the night. But when we get to Mari, like things aren't nearly as creepy or weird or freaky. And Mari actually, it's kind of a cute story if you really think about it. She runs into this guy named Takahashi, and Takahashi, he's kind of a quirky, unique character. He plays the trombone, and he's out and about because he has to practice with his band. Before his practice, he's going into Denny's to kind of eat something real quick before he practices. And he runs into Mari, and he knows Mari because he's a schoolmate of her sister, Eri Asai, who's asleep. Takahashi and his friend actually came over to the Sai house and they had this like little get together. But Takahashi and Mari don't actually talk during this first meeting at this pool party at the Sai house. They're just kind of there, but they don't really interact much. So this is really like their first like actual meeting in the sense that they're actually talking to each other. And it's kind of an awkward conversation because Mari really isn't interested in talking to anyone. She's actually in this Denny's just trying to read a book, and she's super absorbed in this book and she doesn't really want anyone to interrupt her, and Takahashi just starts sitting down next to her without asking, and they talk a little bit revolving around Mari's sister Eri, and they talk a little bit about her and just little things here and there, and then Takahashi goes to his practice and Mari just stays in the Denny's and is kind of like meh, and continues to read her book. But things really start to happen when, I think her name is Karu. She comes in and she's searching for Mari and she finds her, and these two have never met, by the way. Karu knows Takahashi and he told her that Mari can speak Chinese. Everyone, by the way, is Japanese, so they're trying to find someone to translate for this woman who is in trouble that is Chinese. And so Karu enlists Mari to translate for this Chinese woman. So she brings her to this love hotel, basically hotels that are set up just for people to hook up in, and there's very minimal human contact. Basically you go in, you look at some pictures, you pick what you want, you get the key, you take the elevator straight to your room. And there's, very little interaction except with the person that you're hooking up with. Yeah, so Mari goes to this love hotel with this woman. The woman is the manager of this love hotel. And one of the people there, she's a Chinese prostitute. That's what they call her, so I'm going to refer to her as such. This Chinese prostitute has been beat up by her client, and her clothes have been taken, and actually all of her possessions had just been taken by this man. I guess what happened is she had gotten her period, and the man didn't like that, and so he just lost it and took all of her stuff and ran away. But yeah, so no one speaks Chinese, and so Mari kind of, comforts her and tries to understand what happened. They're able to help her, get to a phone so she can call the people she's working for. They're like Chinese gangsters. That's, again, what they call them. She ends up leaving with these gangsters. She just kind of goes off into the night, and we don't ever see this woman again. We do see a little bit of the guy that took her away, the gangster, a couple times. That plot line, again, just kind of disappears. But it does leave an effect on Mari. Mari feels really connected to this woman. Circumstances were different. She really feels like she would be friends with this woman. And I do think that it's a really good analogy also for how Mari feels about her sister, because I think there's a lot of connections between her sister, Ariasai, who is a model, and this woman who's a prostitute. The comparison is just that they both make their money based on their looks. If something happens to their appearance, they're not going to be able to make money. And actually, it's directly mentioned in the text that this prostitute now isn't going to be able to get work for a while because she has black eyes. She's been beat up. And obviously, the same would be true if Eri had gotten beat up and she had black eyes. She wouldn't be able to model until they healed up. And I think just having so much pressure being put on how you look, that's how you make your income, that must be so stressful, because your looks are something that are not permanent and can easily be affected by just an accident. In this case, she had no control over what happened. It wasn't her fault. Life just happened, and now she's going to be out of work for a while. And that's horrible. And we also know that Ariasai is going through something. There's definitely something going on, which is why she pushes herself away from the world and why she's built this wall from everyone. And it's mentioned that Mari feels like there's a wall put up between her and her sister, that she can talk to her sister, but her sister doesn't hear it. It's like she's not really comprehending what's being said. She's just in her own little world. And this was before she even fell asleep. And obviously now that she is asleep, it's even more exemplified. The fact that she's in her own little world and there really is no way of directly contacting her. We just have to wait for her to get out of it, to just snap out of it. So there's a lot of interesting symbolism and a lot of interesting interconnections between the characters. So another thing that is mentioned actually by Takahashi, one of my favorite characters, he's talking about Area Sai, and he did have a very interesting conversation with Ari before all this happened, and he's recounting this to Mari, and he's talking about how he noticed that she was hurting and that it really didn't matter what he said to her. Like, she didn't really care about his input on any of this. It was really just for her own benefit to just get it out. So Ari was going through a lot of things, and Takahashi could sense that, and he's telling Mari, you know, I think she's carrying around so many problems all by herself, and she can't make any headway with it. She's searching for help, and she doesn't know how else to express that except by hurting herself. And I think by hurting herself, what he's trying to get at is this whole idea of her completely shutting down from the world, and in this case, falling asleep for 2 months. There's a lot of horrifying things that are hurting her in her dream state. It's not this like happy-go-lucky dream. It's horrifying. She doesn't know how to ask someone for help, like truly ask them for help. So she's burdened down by all of this, and she doesn't know how to deal with it, so she just kind of decides to go to sleep, so she doesn't have to deal with it directly. And that obviously is not good for her. So there's definitely a lot of conversation in this book about what's going on with Ari and how this is affecting her, and definitely a huge comparison between her and Mari. Mari has always been kind of put down because her sister is so beautiful. Her parents always called her ugly. You know, ever since she was a little kid, she's always been the ugly one. And they tried to make her kind of like, oh, she can be the smart one, the academic one, and Ari can be the pretty one. And so Mari tries to be academic, but the pressure from that physically made her sick. And then she wasn't able to go to school because she was just so anxious about getting good grades. And it was just too much for her to take. And so she kind of stops going to school for a while, and she, again, kind of like her sister, she kind of pushes herself away from the world. But she does go back to it. She finds another school, actually Chinese school, which is why she knows Chinese in the first place. She goes there because there's less of an emphasis on the perfect grades, and so she feels a lot more at ease there at that school, and so she's able to continue her studies. And she eventually gets a scholarship to go to China, which is kind of this sad ending to the story in a sense, because Mari is going to be going to China, and a lot has happened in this night, and by the end of the story, she's really connected to Takahashi. They finally have like a real conversation, and it's definitely something that she's enjoyed. And now Takahashi wants to see her during the day sometime, but she has to turn him down because she'll be going in a few days, so she's not gonna have any time to see him. But I really love that Takahashi's like, no worries, I can wait till you get back, like, I'll just write you letters in the meantime. Which is just so cute. I just love the interaction between them, and I really liked how this whole night and this whole experience has really changed Mari. And I just really liked seeing her development throughout the story. It was a lot of fun. And like I said, it was just really enjoyable overall. I really liked the characters, and I also like the symbolism that as soon as Mari finally opens up about what's going on with her sister, that's when things start to look better. Like, she's transported back home. She's safe. Like, she's no longer in a lot of pain anymore because Mari reached out. And by the end of the book, it's really nice because Mari, for the first time in this whole book, I mean, the whole time she's talking about how she just doesn't want to go home. She just doesn't want to go home. She says that over and over again. And then by the end, after she's finally talked about this, she finally just needs to go home. She wants to go home. And when she does, she goes into her sister's room. She tries to talk to her. I mean, nothing happens. Her sister still doesn't respond, but she doesn't give up, and she crawls into bed with her sister, and she like snuggles her. Again, her sister doesn't like wake up or anything, but it's something that Mari needed, and it was really nice to see them reach out to each other in a sense, especially Mari, because I don't think she really knew how to reach out to her sister and was maybe just afraid to. But now she just needed to. So it was really nice to see her actually reach out to her sister And even though there isn't any like miraculous results, it's still nice to see them heading in the right direction. And there is a sliver of hope because there's kind of a mention of like, maybe there was a twitch, maybe she's starting to wake up. So there's definitely hope in this story. It is something that takes time, and it isn't something that is easy, and it's not something that happens overnight. So one last thing I just want to mention is that there were a couple things that happened in this book that I didn't fully understand why they happened. For me personally, as a reader, I just have a hard time getting past that. I just want to know. I want to understand. One thing that really jumps out to me that I was like, okay, is there's this scene where Mari goes into a bathroom and she's washing her hands, and then she puts her hands on the sink and she's just like staring at her reflection, and she's kind of almost like waiting for something to happen. And I can see like, okay, she's trying to be introspective, she's trying to like really understand who she is. Okay, fine. But then she leaves the bathroom, but like the camera or narrator or whatever you want to call it, like stays in the bathroom. And we're looking at the mirror, and Mari's reflection is still in the mirror. The reflection is just kind of there. And I was like, okay, interesting. Pretty much the same thing happens to another character. And actually, it's really, I'm not understanding why it happened to these two characters, because I don't really see the connection between these two directly. So either way, so the other character that this happens to, his name is Shirakawa. He's the man that beat up this Chinese prostitute that I mentioned earlier. After everything happens with the Chinese prostitute, we start to follow Shirakawa. We find out that he's married with kids, he works the late shift, and again, not much happens with him, which again, it was kind of weird that like all of a sudden we're following him. It didn't really seem to matter that we were following him at all. And then we get this scene where he's washing his hands or something, and he's looking in the mirror. He almost like expects something to like break out of him or something. I don't know, that's like his animal side, you know, the side that attacked this poor woman, or I don't know what, but obviously nothing happens. And then he leaves, and then we stay in the bathroom, and his reflection's in there. And again, I don't understand why, and I don't understand why this happened to these characters specifically. I just don't understand. It just kind of happened. It was unusual, but I didn't fully get it, other than just standard mirror imagery. Not really sure why their images would stay in the mirror. I can understand why you're staring into one, but not why your image is like stuck there. And is it like always stuck there, or is it just temporarily stuck there? Never mentioned again. So I don't know. It was rather unusual. Also, Area Sai is transported into that room I told you about. Well, that room, I mean, the narrator specifically says that, like, oh, this looks exactly like Shirakawa's office, except that all the furniture is removed. And also, to, like, confirm that, is that Eri finds this pencil that has Veritech on it. And it's described as being this very same pencil that Shirakawa had in his office. Interesting connection. Don't know why. Why is she transported to his office? Why? Why? I don't know. So there was a lot of interconnections that I didn't even fully get, and those are the ones that really jumped out to me that was like, wait, what? They were interesting, did not understand how they fit into the story itself, but it was interesting, and I'm sure that there is some meaning, I just don't get it. Yeah, like I said, there's a lot of things that happen in this story, and some things are directly related, some things I can kind of make inferences that, like, okay, I can see how that helps me understand this story as a whole, and then there's just some things I just don't understand, like I just mentioned. So overall, I gave it 4 stars because I did really enjoy this book. It was really engaging. I thought there was a lot of really interesting, insightful things in this book, and I definitely would recommend this. I think that you should be warned that there are going to be some creepy imagery, some questions that will not be explained fully, and just some general, like, quirky, bizarre things. But I think if you go into this book knowing that, it really isn't that big of a deal overall. Obviously, if you're not expecting it, it would be way more jarring and probably harder to get through. But I do think that if you're able to overlook some of those things, that it's still a really enjoyable read. And I definitely would read more of Murakami's work in the future, just because I think it is so unique and interesting. Okay, so that was my review on After Dark by Haruki Murakami. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'm also really curious to hear what you think. Let me know if you read this book or if what I said sounded interesting to you at all. Please just let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, and until next time.